I wake up in a cold sweat. The same dream clawing at the edges of my consciousness like a desperate animal trying to escape. In it, I'm always digging, the shovel biting into cold, unforgiving earth. But I never dig fast enough. The whispers always start, growing louder with every scoop of dirt until they're screaming in my ears. And then the ground beneath me gives way. Tonight was no different. 3 months working at Oakwood Cemetery outside of Williston, North Dakota. And the dreams have become as regular as the sunset. I check my phone. 3:47 a.m. Too early to be awake. Too late to fall back asleep. The cheap motel sheets are soaked with sweat despite the chill seeping through the thin walls. Winter comes early up here, especially this close to the Montana border. The weather forecast warned of the first snow next week. Good timing for me to be digging holes for a living. How did I end up here? A geology degree with crushing student loans. Then the oil bust of 2021 that dried up all the decent-paying field jobs across the Bakken Formation. My ex-girlfriend Jamie already had a job lined up in Minneapolis. She asked me to come along. I should have. Instead, I stayed, watching drilling operations shut down one by one, until my prospects were as barren as the winter fields surrounding me. A month living out of my Jeep Cherokee, showering at truck stops, eating cold beans from the cam. Then I saw the Help Wanted sign at Oakwood, stapled to a wooden post outside the iron gates. Gravedigger groundskeeper, no experience necessary, housing included. The caretaker, an ancient man named Vern Ellsworth, barely glanced at my application. His roomy eyes had fixed on my hands instead. Strong hands, he'd said. That's what we need. Someone who can move earth. The housing turned out to be a drafty cottage at the edge of the cemetery property that smelled of mothballs and pipe tobacco. Still, it beat living in my car. The job paid enough to afford this motel room in town during my days off. Williston is a strange place, a boomtown gone quiet, filled with empty man camps and half-built developments. The locals, the ones who've been here for generations, eye outsiders with quiet suspicion. They shop at the Cash-Wise Foods on 26th Street, attend church at Gloria Day Lutheran, and seem to know things they don't share. I grab my grimy Carhartt jacket from the chair and dig out my notebook. Flipping past pages of geological survey notes from my previous life, I find the list I've been adding to for the past 3 months. 7 rules so far. 7 rules that Vern insisted I follow, his voice shaking with an urgency that seemed excessive for cemetery maintenance. Rule 1. Never dig a grave after sunset. Rule 2. Always cover your shovel with a cloth when storing it. Rule 3. If you hear your name called, ignore it unless you can see who's calling. Rule 4. Always lock the north gate first, then the east, then the south, then the west. Rule 5. Leave offerings of fresh water by the unmarked grave in Section 3 on Fridays. Rule 6. Never remove the small stones visitors place on certain headstones. Rule 7. If you see a funeral procession after hours, stay in the cottage until it's gone. I trace my finger over Rule 3, remembering the first time I heard my name whispered through the fog that often blankets the cemetery at dawn. I almost answered. Almost. Hello, viewers. If you wish your stories or experiences to be narrated by me, share them on our own subreddit, which you can join from the description below. I will pick the stories from the community and narrate them, and every once in a while, we will host a 3-hour story compilation. Morning arrives with reluctance, gray lights seeping through threadbare curtains. I toss the notebook aside and drag myself to the shower. The Lone Star Inn might be the cheapest accommodation in Williston, but at least the water pressure is decent. The drive back to Oakwood takes me past the sprawling Walmart supercenter, and through neighborhoods where oil money built McMansions now standing half empty. The radio crackles with static as I turn onto Cemetery Road, like it always does. Kai's 6:60 a.m. disappears into white noise about a quarter mile from the gates. Vern's ancient Ford pickup is parked outside the caretaker's office, a converted Victorian house with peeling yellow paint that sits just inside the main entrance. I haven't seen the old man in 3 days, not since he handed me a map marking spots where I needed to clear away fallen branches after last week's windstorm. The office door creaks as I push it open. Vern? He's hunched over his desk, surrounded by ancient ledgers with brittle, yellowed pages. The room smells of coffee and dust. Vern doesn't look up. "Got a burial today," he says, his voice like gravel. "Sandra Buckley. Section 5, Plot 22B. I nod, though he isn't looking at me. I'll start digging. Wait. He finally raises his head. I try not to stare at the jaundiced whites of his eyes. Sheriff called. Bodies being released late. Funerals at sunset. My stomach tightens. Rule 1. Never dig a grave after sunset. I should start now then, I say, reaching for the plot map on the wall. No. The word comes out sharp. Section 5 floods easy. Dig too early and you'll have a pool by burial time. But the rule? I know the damn rules. Vern snaps, then seems to catch himself. His gnarled fingers trace a pattern on the desk. 3 quick taps, then 2 slow ones. You'll dig at 4. Burial's at 6. You'll be finished before dark. October in North Dakota. Sunset at 6:37 p.m. It would be close. Who was she? I ask, trying to ease the tension. Sandra Buckley? Vern's face changes subtly, lips pressing into a thin line. Lived here all her life. Found dead in her kitchen 3 days ago. He pauses. Sheriff says natural causes. The way he says it makes it clear he doesn't believe it. You knew her? Everyone knows everyone in Williston. He mutters, turning back to his ledgers. She was a handsome before she married. Her grandfather helped establish this cemetery back in 1912. I glance at the old photographs framed on the wall. Sepia-toned images of men in formal attire standing beside freshly dug graves, their faces solemn. I've spent hours studying those pictures during slow afternoons, noting how the cemetery's layout has barely changed in over a century. There's something else, Vern says, sliding a folded piece of paper across the desk. Found this nailed to the north gate this morning. I unfold it, revealing a crude drawing of a circle with 7 lines radiating outward like a child's rendering of the sun. Underneath, written in shaky handwriting, "The sleepers are waking." What does this mean? I ask. Vern takes the paper back, crumples it, and tosses it into the trash. Nothing. Teenagers. Halloween's coming up and they always get riled up about the cemetery. He's lying. I can tell by the way his right eye twitches. I'll check the perimeter before I start digging, I offer. Make sure no one's been messing around. Vern nods curtly. Take lunch now. I need you sharp this afternoon. Outside, the October air has teeth, biting through my flannel shirt as I walk the grounds. Oakwood sprawls over 23 acres, the oldest graves dating back to the 1880s when Williston was just a whistle stop on the Great Northern Railway. Section 1, near the entrance, holds the town founders, ornate obelisks and marble angels watching over their remains. Section 2 is mostly from the 1920s and 30s, more modest, but still carrying names that appear on street signs throughout town. Peterson, Knutson, Amundsen. Section 3 is where things get strange. Dozens of graves with only numbers, no names. And the unmarked grave where I leave water every Friday. A simple stone tablet set flush with the ground, bearing only a carving of that same 7-rayed circle from the note. I reach Section 5 and find Plot 22B, marked with a small metal flag. The surrounding graves bear recent dates, most from the past decade. As I'm checking the area, my boot strikes something hard. Bending down, I find a small stone figurine half buried in the soil, a crude human shape with no facial features. Something makes me pocket it rather than leave it. As I straighten, a flash of movement catches my eye at the tree line that borders the north edge of the cemetery. A figure, slim, possibly female, ducking behind a thick oak. "Hey!" I call out, jogging toward the trees. But by the time I reach them, there's no one there. Just the wind stirring fallen leaves and, bizarrely, a single red shoe, a woman's flat, lying on its side. I pick it up, turning it over in my hands. The inside label reads Nordstrom, with a size 7. It looks new, barely worn, with no mud despite the damp ground. Rule 3 echoes in my mind. If you hear your name called, ignore it unless you can see who's calling. As if summoned by my thought, a voice whispers behind me. "Michael." I freeze, not turning, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Michael." It comes again, closer this time, a woman's voice, soft and familiar in a way I can't place. I keep my eyes fixed on the red shoe, reminding myself of the rule. Unless you can see who's calling. "Turn around, Michael, please, it's me." The voice is Jamie's, my ex-girlfriend's, but that's impossible. Jamie is in Minneapolis, 300 miles away. I clutch the shoe tightly and walk back toward the caretaker's office, never looking back, even as the voice calls my name once more, breaking on the final syllable like a sob. Back at the office, I find Vern gone, a note taped to his computer monitor. Had to see Sheriff Nordstrom. Be back by 3. Start digging at 4 sharp. The red shoe sits on the desk in front of me, alongside the stone figurine. Both seem to mock my attempt to understand what's happening. I've been here 3 months, followed the rules meticulously, and still feel like I'm missing crucial pieces of a larger puzzle. I pull out my phone to search for news about Sandra Buckley's death, but as usual, there's no signal on cemetery grounds. Another quirk of Oakwood that Vern dismissed as just the terrain. With time to kill, I decide to do something I've been putting off for weeks. Explore the caretaker's records. If Vern is hiding something, there might be clues in the old ledgers. The oldest book dates back to 1912, its leather binding cracked and peeling. The pages contain neat columns of names, dates, and plot numbers, occasionally interspersed with handwritten notes. Nothing unusual until I reach entries from 1918, the year of the Spanish flu pandemic. October 1918 shows a spike in burials, often multiple per day, but what catches my eye is a notation beside 7 graves in Section 3. Arrangement complete. Circle sealed until necessary. I flip through more recent ledgers. In 1978, another notation appears. Circle reinforced after incident. New offering protocol established. And again in 2001. Perimeter secured following breach. Water offerings increased to weekly. The same 7-rayed circle symbol from the note appears periodically in the margins, sometimes accompanied by tally marks. The door bangs open, startling me so badly I knock the shoe to the floor. It's not Vern, but a woman, mid-40s, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, wearing a Williston Police Department jacket with Sheriff emblazoned across the back. "You must be Michael Reeves," she says, extending a hand. "Sheriff Lynn Nordstrom." I shake her hand, noting her firm grip and the way her eyes immediately lock onto the red shoe on the floor. "Where did you find that?" Her tone is casual, but her posture stiffens. "Near the north tree line," I answer honestly. "Thought someone might have lost it." She picks it up, turning it over just as I had done. This belongs to Sandra Buckley. My skin prickles. The woman being buried today? Sheriff Nordstrom nods, placing the shoe in an evidence bag she pulls from her pocket. Mind telling me why you're going through cemetery records? I close the ledger, feeling inexplicably guilty. Just trying to learn more about the place. Vern doesn't explain much. That sounds like Vern. She smiles, but it doesn't reach her eyes. I've known him since I was a kid. Man of few words, especially about Oakwood. Did you grow up in Williston? I ask, trying to redirect the conversation. Born and raised. 5th generation. My great-great-grandfather was one of the 7 families that established the town. She gestures to the photographs on the wall. That's him there, Elias Nordstrom, 3rd from the left. I study the image. A stern-faced man with a thick mustache standing beside a freshly dug grave. The same 7-rayed symbol visible on a medallion around his neck. What can you tell me about Sandra Buckley? I venture. Vern mentioned she was found dead in her kitchen. Something flickers across the sheriff's face. Natural causes. Heart failure. That warrants involvement from the sheriff's department. Small town, she replies flatly. I check all deaths personally. She walks to the window, looking out at the cemetery grounds. Beautiful place, isn't it? Peaceful, most of the time. Most of the time? I echo. Every place has its disturbances. She turns back to me. Vern tells me you've been following the rules well. The casual mention of the rules from someone who shouldn't know about them sends a jolt through me. What rules would those be? I ask carefully. Sheriff Nordstrom smiles again, this time with genuine amusement. Don't play dumb, Mr. Reeves. The Oakwood rules. 7 of them, last I checked, though that can change when necessary. Who makes these rules? What happens if they're broken? The rules have always been here, she says, as if that explains everything. As for breaking them... She trails off, then checks her watch. You should start getting ready to dig. It's nearly 3. The funeral's at 6, I point out. That's cutting it close to sunset. Yes, Sheriff Nordstrom agrees. Very close. Almost as if someone wanted to test the boundaries. She heads for the door, then pauses. Oh, I almost forgot. Vern won't be back this afternoon. Family emergency. He didn't mention family. Everyone has family, Mr. Reeves. Even Vern. She pulls out a business card and places it on the desk. Call me when you're finished with the burial, no matter how late. After she leaves, I sit in the suddenly oppressive silence of the office. Without Vern, I'll be handling the burial alone, something I've never done before. He's always been present, watching from a distance, making sure I follow procedures exactly. At precisely 4 p.m., I gather my equipment. Shovel, measuring tape, tarp, and gloves. The temperature has dropped further, and dark clouds mass on the horizon, promising early darkness. Perfect. Plot to 22B is located near a massive oak tree, its branches stretching over several graves like protective arms. I mark out the standard dimensions: 8 feet long, 3 feet wide, 5 feet deep, and begin to dig. The earth is harder than it should be, even accounting for the approaching winter. My shovel strikes something metallic about 2 feet down, producing a hollow ringing sound. Brushing away soil, I uncover an old tin box about the size of a paperback book. The lock is broken, the metal corroded. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, I find a journal with a faded leather cover. The first page bears an inscription: Property of Clara Hanson, 1957. Sandra Buckley's mother, if I remember Vern's comment about Sandra being a Hanson before marriage. I shouldn't read it. I should continue digging. But the sun is already low, casting long shadows across the cemetery, and some instinct tells me this journal is important. The entries start mundanely enough. A teenage girl documenting high school crushes and family disagreements. Then, in October 1957, found grandmother's papers about the circle. 7 families, 7 sacrifices to keep something contained. They call them the sleepers, and say they've been here since before the town. The cemetery was built to contain them after they were discovered during railroad construction. I'm not supposed to know any of this, but it explains the weird rules Dad always follows at Oakwood. My hands tremble as I turn to the next entry. Watched from my bedroom window last night. Dad and 6 other men performed some kind of ritual at the cemetery. They each cut their palms and let blood drip onto that unmarked grave in Section 3. The ground moved afterward, like something was pushing up from beneath. Dad says each family must provide a keeper to maintain the rules. He's the handsome keeper. When he dies, it will pass to me. The next several pages contain detailed notes about the rules, some familiar, others I've never heard. Rule 8. If the ground moves beneath your feet, drop whatever you're carrying and run to consecrated ground. Rule 9. Never dig deeper than 6 feet anywhere in the cemetery. Rule 10. If you find a stone figurine, return it to Section 3 immediately. I touch the figurine in my pocket, a chill spreading through me. I need to put it back. The journal's final entry, dated November 2nd, 1957. Something got out. Tommy Wilson is missing. The sleepers are hungry after so long. Dad says we need another sacrifice to strengthen the circle, but the other families are hesitating. I'm scared. I hear voices outside my window at night, calling my name in Tommy's voice. Dad says never to answer, unless I can see who's calling. The journal ends abruptly. I check my watch, 5:30 p.m. The grave is only half finished, and the funeral procession will arrive in 30 minutes. I should be digging frantically. Instead, I'm sitting in a partially excavated grave, as the shadows lengthen around me, holding a dead woman's mother's journal that confirms my worst fears. There's something ancient and hungry beneath Oakwood Cemetery, and the 7 rules exist to keep it contained. In the distance, I hear car engines, the funeral procession approaching. And behind that sound, almost too faint to notice, comes a soft scratching from beneath the earth where I sit. I scramble out of the half-dug grave, my boots slipping on the loose soil. The journal goes into my backpack. The stone figurine burns in my pocket. I need to return it to Section 3, but the funeral procession is already turning through the main gates, headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. The first raindrops hit my face as I grab my shovel and dig with desperate energy. 5 feet deep. That's what Vern always insists on, though standard graves elsewhere are often dug to 6. Rule 9 now makes the reason clear. Never dig deeper than 6 feet anywhere in the cemetery. The scratching below has stopped, but I swear I can feel vibrations through the soles of my boots. By the time the procession parks along Cemetery Lane, I've managed to reach the required depth. My clothes are soaked with rain and sweat. My hands raw inside my gloves. The hole looks ragged, unprofessional. Nothing like Vern's precision work. But it will have to do. I spread the tarp beside the grave and set up the lowering devices. Simple straps that will ease the casket into the ground. The funeral home staff will handle most of it. I just need to prepare the site and fill the grave afterward. A line of black umbrellas approaches from the parking area. At the front walks a balding man in a dark suit, Dale Schmidt from Williston Funeral Home. Behind him comes the pallbearers carrying a polished oak casket, then about 20 mourners hunched against the intensifying rain. Schmidt gives me a curt nod as they position the casket over the grave. I stand back, trying to be invisible as the pastor from Gloria Dei steps forward to begin the service. The wind carries his words away before they reach me, but the mourners bow their heads in unison. I scan the gathered faces, wondering which belong to the 7 families mentioned in Clara's journal. Sheriff Nordstrom stands at the back, her face expressionless beneath her hood. Beside her is a girl, maybe 16 or 17, with long dark hair plastered to her pale face by the rain. She's staring directly at me with an intensity that makes my skin crawl. The service ends quickly, the weather forcing brevity. The casket is lowered efficiently, and Schmidt hands me a ceremonial handful of dirt to cast into the grave. As the mourners disperse toward their cars, the teenage girl breaks away and approaches me. "You're the new gravedigger," she says. Not a question. "Michael," I offer, unsure why I'm giving my name to this strange girl. "Ellie Buckley," she replies. "Sandra was my aunt." I murmur condolences, which she ignores. "Did you find anything when you were digging?" Her pale blue eyes hold mine with unnerving steadiness. "Just dirt," I lie, the journal seemingly growing heavier in my backpack. "Liar," she whispers, but her voice carries no accusation, only sadness. "They'll come for you now. They always come for the new keeper." "I'm not a keeper," I protest. "I just dig the holes." Ellie smiles, a brutal expression. That's how it starts. First you dig, then you keep, then you join. Join what? The circle, of course. She glances toward the sky. "You should finish before dark. It's getting harder to keep them down." She starts to walk away, then turns back. "The figurine belongs in the box by the unmarked grave. Don't just drop it on the ground." Before I can respond, Sheriff Nordstrom calls sharply from the parking area. "Ellie, let's go." The girl gives me one last penetrating look before joining the sheriff. I watch them drive away, the red taillights disappearing through the cemetery gates, leaving me alone with Sandra Buckley's casket and the rapidly approaching darkness. I check my watch. 6:23 p.m. 14 minutes until official sunset, though the storm clouds have already stolen most of the light. I need to fill the grave, return the figurine to Section 3, and get out. Working frantically, I shovel dirt back into the hole, not bothering with the usual care to avoid damaging the casket. Rain turns the soil to mud that splashes my jeans and boots. At 6:35 p.m., 2 minutes before sunset, I tamp down the last of the earth and gather my equipment. Rule 1 echoes in my mind. Never dig a grave after sunset. But what about filling one? I don't wait to find out. Throwing my shovel and tarp into the wheelbarrow, I sprint towards Section 3, the wheelbarrow bouncing wildly over the uneven ground. The stone figurine presses against my thigh through my pocket, seeming to grow warmer with each step. Section 3 is the oldest part of the cemetery, where weathered headstones lean at precarious angles. Many are so worn that their inscriptions have faded to illegibility. The unmarked grave sits in the center of a circular arrangement of 7 larger monuments, each bearing the name of one of Williston's founding families: Nordstrom, Hansen, Ellsworth, Schmidt, Buckley, Peterson, and Wilson. I approach the unmarked stone with its 7-rayed symbol. Rain has pooled on its flat surface, reflecting the darkening sky. Beside it, half hidden in the long grass, is a small stone box. The moment I lift the hinged lid, a hush falls over the cemetery. The rain continues to fall, but silently, as if the droplets are being absorbed before they can make a sound. I place the figurine inside the box, nestling it among dozens of identical stone figures. As I close the lid, the silence breaks. A low rumble vibrates through the ground, not thunder, but something deeper, like the purr of a massive beast. The soil around the unmarked grave shifts slightly. Rule 8. If the ground moves beneath your feet, drop whatever you're carrying and run to consecrated ground. I abandon the wheelbarrow and run. Not toward the gates, which suddenly seem miles away, but toward the small chapel near the entrance of Section 2. Vern once mentioned it was consecrated in 1921 after the Troubles. The chapel door sticks, swollen from years of exposure to the elements. I throw my shoulder against it, desperately aware of the sound of shifting earth growing louder behind me. The door gives way suddenly, sending me sprawling onto the dusty wooden floor. Scrambling to my feet, I slam the door shut and slide the ancient iron bolt into place. The chapel's interior is sparse, a few rotting pews, a simple altar, and stained glass windows depicting 7 figures standing around a pit, their hands extended downward as if restraining something below. I sink onto the nearest pew, my breathing ragged in the silence. Outside, the rain has stopped, and an unnatural stillness blankets the cemetery. I pull out my phone. 6:52 p.m. No signal. I'm trapped here until morning, or until someone comes looking for me. Movement at one of the windows catches my eye. A face peers in. The teenage girl, Ellie. Her expression is solemn as she presses a piece of paper against the glass, written in large letters, "Don't leave until dawn." I nod to show I understand. She disappears from view, leaving me alone in the growing darkness. To keep my mind occupied, I pull out Clara's journal again, skimming through the earlier entries for anything I might have missed. Near the middle, several pages have been torn out, leaving jagged edges. After these missing pages, Clara's handwriting changes, becoming more hurried and slanted. The sacrifice worked. Tommy's body was never found, but the ground settled again. Dad says it will hold for another generation if we maintain the circle. I'm to be the next Hansen keeper, but I don't want this burden. The dreams have started, digging in the earth while something watches from below. I snap the journal shut, unsettled by how closely her dreams match my own. Outside, something scratches at the chapel door. Not urgently, but with patient persistence, like an animal that knows its prey is cornered. I move away from the door, deeper into the chapel. The altar draws my attention. Simple wood, carved with the now familiar 7-rayed symbol. I run my fingers over the grooves, feeling unexpected warmth in the wood. A hidden drawer in the altar's side slides open at my touch. Inside lies a leather-bound book much older than Clara's journal, its pages brittle with age. The title page reads, "The Keeping of the Circle, Duties and Observations, 1887 to present." I carefully turn the yellowed pages, reading accounts from previous keepers, members of the 7 families tasked with maintaining the rules and containing whatever lies beneath Oakwood. The earliest entry, written in faded brown ink. May 12th, 1887, railroad excavation uncovered the chamber. 7 workers lost before we understood what we had found. They sleep now, but hunger makes them restless. We 7 families have bound ourselves to keep watch. The circle must be maintained. Later entries document periodic disturbances when the rules were broken or neglected. 1918. Spanish influenza provided cover for necessary sacrifices. Circle reinforced with 7 offerings. 1957. Wilson boy taken after boundary stone was moved. Circle restored. 2001. Tourist violated Rule 3. Answered the calling. Partial emergence contained, but circle weakened. The most recent entry, dated just 3 weeks ago, is written in a shaky hand I recognize as Vern's. Sandra Buckley found the old records, threatened to expose everything, to break the circle permanently. The other families voted. She was chosen as the offering, May God forgive us, but the sleepers must remain below. New keeper needed urgently. The handsome line ends with Sandra. Horror washes over me. Sandra wasn't a natural death. She was sacrificed by the town's founding families to feed whatever they're keeping buried. And now they need a new keeper to replace the handsome family's representative. A new keeper like me, who was hired with suspicious ease, who has been carefully taught the rules, who has already begun having the dreams. The scratching at the door stops suddenly. In the silence that follows, I hear a voice. Vern's. "Michael, are you in there? It's safe now. You can come out." I stay frozen, remembering Rule 3. If you hear your name called, ignore it unless you can see who's calling. "Michael, please. I need to explain everything." Vern's voice sounds desperate, genuine. "What you found in Sandra's grave. I can tell you what it means." I approach one of the windows cautiously, peering through the dirty glass. A figure stands at the chapel door, Vern's height and build, wearing his familiar work jacket. But the face is wrong. Features shift and flow like melting wax, trying to form a recognizable shape, but never quite succeeding. I back away from the window, bile rising in my throat. "Michael," the thing outside calls, its voice perfectly mimicking Vern's concerned tone. "Don't you want to know why the dream started? Don't you want to know what's happening to you?" Despite my terror, part of me does want to know. The voice knows exactly what to offer, answers to the questions that have plagued me since I arrived at Oakwood. I check my watch again. 7:43 p.m. Nearly 11 hours until sunrise. The thing that isn't Vern taps on the door, almost playfully. "I can wait all night, Michael." But can you? Hours crawl by. The not Vern outside has stopped speaking, but occasionally taps on different windows, reminding me of its presence. I've wedged myself between the altar and the back wall, the keeper's book open on my lap, reading by the dim light of my phone's flashlight. The book details how the sleepers were discovered during railroad construction in 1887. Workers uncovered what they thought was a cave system beneath what would become Williston. Inside, they found 7 stone sarcophagi arranged in a circle, each containing what appeared to be a sleeping humanoid figure. But these weren't human remains. They moved when uncovered, reaching for the workers with limbs that could elongate like taffy. 7 men died before the excavation was sealed. The 7 families who owned the land formed a pact to contain what they'd found, establishing Oakwood Cemetery as a cover. The original graves in Section 3, the ones with only numbers, hold those first 7 victims. Over decades, the sleepers' influence spread underground. They could project themselves somehow, creating duplicates of people who had recently died, or who had connections to the cemetery. These duplicates would try to lure the living into breaking the rules, creating opportunities for the sleepers to claim more victims and further weaken their confinement. Each time the circle weakened, a sacrifice was required to strengthen it. The families took turns providing these sacrifices, one of their own, always with a plausible cover story. Heart attacks, accidents, suicides. A handwritten note inserted between pages catches my attention. The sleepers feed on memory and identity. They cannot create, they can only mimic. What they crave most is the sense of self they lack. Each feeding makes them stronger, more coherent. If all 7 were to wake fully, they would consume every mind in Williston to construct identities of their own. A distant crash makes me jolt upright. Something heavy has fallen outside. I creep to the window, keeping low. The graveyard is bathed in moonlight. The storm has passed, leaving everything wet and glistening. My wheelbarrow has been overturned, tools scattered across the path. Movement flickers between gravestones, not just one figure now, but 3. The not Vern has been joined by others, one small and slight like Ellie, another tall and official-looking in what appears to be a sheriff's uniform. They're not approaching the chapel. Instead, they're methodically searching the cemetery, moving with unnatural coordination. Hunting. The phone in my hand buzzes suddenly. A text message despite the lack of signal bars. The number is unknown. Stay put. Real Vern coming at dawn with others. Not safe. Do not answer any voices. As I stare at the message, another arrives. They can't get into consecrated ground, but will try to trick you out. Offerings disturbed. Circle weakening. I text back. Who is this? The reply comes immediately. LEB using emergency system. Battery dying. Stay put. The figures outside have noticed the light from my phone. They converge toward the chapel with frightening speed, moving in a disjointed manner that reminds me of stop-motion animation. I duck down, killing the light, but it's too late. They've spotted me. 3 faces press against different windows simultaneously. Vern, Sheriff Nordstrom, and Ellie. But all wrong, their features sliding and reshaping as if struggling to maintain human form. Michael, they call in unison, their voices perfectly matched to the originals. We need your help. The circle is breaking. I retreat to the altar, clutching the keeper's book against my chest like a shield. The real Ellie's text said Vern is coming at dawn. That's still hours away. You can't stay in there forever. Not Sheriff Nordstrom calls. The consecration is failing. It's been years since anyone maintained it properly. That gives me an idea. The book mentioned consecrated ground as a barrier the sleepers couldn't cross. If the chapel's protection is failing, perhaps it can be reinforced. I scan the small space for anything useful. Behind the altar, a small cabinet yields a promising find. A tarnished silver box containing communion supplies. A cup, a plate, a bottle of wine so old the label has disintegrated, and a tin of stale communion wafers. I've never been particularly religious, but I grew up attending Lutheran services with my grandmother in Minnesota. I remember enough to improvise a blessing. The things outside seem to sense my intentions. Their tapping becomes more insistent, their calls more desperate. Don't waste your time, Not Ellie says, her voice childlike and mocking. You can't reconsecrate ground without proper authority. I ignore her, arranging the communion items on the altar. The book didn't specify who needed to maintain the consecration, just that it needed to be done. The world has changed, Michael. Not Vern adds. The old ways don't work anymore. There's no power in those symbols. I pour the ancient wine into the cup, place a wafer on the plate, and begin reciting what I remember of the communion liturgy. The words feel strange in my mouth, but I push through, improvising where my memory fails. A shriek from outside interrupts me, a sound no human throat could produce. The Not Ellie figure backs away from her window, face contorted in what might be pain. Encouraged, I continue the ritual, speaking with more confidence now. I make the sign of the cross over the elements, then walk the perimeter of the chapel, tracing the same symbol at each window and the door. The creatures outside retreat further with each blessing. Their forms waver more violently now, struggling to maintain human appearance. The Not Vern's face suddenly slips entirely, revealing something beneath that makes me stagger back in horror. A featureless oval with 7 pulsing indentations where eyes and mouth should be. By the time I complete the circuit and return to the altar, the windows show only empty cemetery grounds. The mimics have retreated, at least for now. Exhausted, I sink onto a pew. The adrenaline that's been keeping me alert begins to ebb, leaving me shaky and hollow. I check my phone. 1:17 a.m. Still hours before dawn. A loud crack from above makes me look up. A thin fissure has appeared in the chapel ceiling, running from the door to the altar. As I watch, it widens slightly, and a trickle of soil spills onto the floor. Rule 9 echoes in my mind. Never dig deeper than 6 feet anywhere in the cemetery. But what if they can dig upward? I grab my phone and text Ellie. They're trying to come up from below. What do? No response. Her battery must be dead, or the emergency system no longer working. The crack widens further. The ground beneath the chapel must be honeycombed with tunnels dug by the sleepers over decades. If they can't enter consecrated ground directly, they'll undermine it until it collapses. I flip frantically through the keeper's book, looking for anything that might help. Near the end, a chapter titled Emergency Measures catches my eye. Most of the instructions involve complex rituals requiring multiple participants, but one stands out: temporary containment. The instructions are simple but disturbing. In dire circumstances, when the circle is breached, a single keeper may establish temporary containment through blood offering. This method buys time only, hours, not days, and carries significant risk to the keeper, who may become bound to the emerging sleeper. More soil sifts down as the crack continues to expand. I don't have much choice. The ritual requires a personal item, blood freely given, and a binding phrase. I dig through my pockets and find my geology field compass, a graduation gift from my father. Following the book's instructions, I place the compass on the altar. Using a sharp edge from the communion plate, I cut my palm and let blood drip onto the compass. With my blood, I bind you, I recite, feeling ridiculous and desperate at once. By my will, I contain you. Until dawn breaks, return below. For several seconds, nothing happens. Then my compass begins to spin wildly, its needle whirling like a propeller. The blood I dripped onto it doesn't roll off, but instead is absorbed into the metal, staining it crimson. The crack in the ceiling stops expanding. The air in the chapel grows frigid, my breath fogging in front of my face. The spinning compass slows, then stops, its needle pointing directly toward the unmarked grave in Section 3. A voice that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere speaks directly into my mind. Accepted, bound until dawn. But we have tasted you now, Michael Reeves. We know your dreams, your fears, your desires. The voice sounds like mine, but with undertones of something ancient and alien, a hollow echo beneath the words. You dig to find truth, to uncover what lies beneath, so much like us. My vision blurs, and suddenly I'm not in the chapel anymore, but standing at the edge of an impossibly deep pit. 7 figures lie at the bottom, partially embedded in the earth like fossilized remains. Except they're moving, slowly turning to look up at me with faces that resemble mine in the way a child's crude drawing might. Recognizable, but fundamentally wrong. Join us, they whisper in unison. Become the 7th. The circle needs completion. I jerk back to awareness, finding myself sprawled on the chapel floor. The crack in the ceiling has sealed itself, leaving only a jagged line to show where it had been. My compass sits on the altar, now permanently stained red, its needle still pointing unerringly toward Section 3. My hand throbs where I cut it, but the wound has changed. The edges have darkened to an unnatural blue-black color, and tiny lines radiate outward along my veins like frost patterns on glass. The book had warned of becoming bound to a sleeper. I think I understand now what that means. I've bought myself time until dawn, but at a cost I'm only beginning to comprehend. Outside, the cemetery lies quiet under the moon. No sign of the mimics, but I don't trust the silence. I check my phone again. 2:23 a.m. Less than 4 hours until sunrise. The binding should hold until then. I hope. My mind races, trying to piece everything together. What about the stone figurines? What role do they play? Anchors. Each one represents a victim claimed by the sleepers. When properly placed in Section 3, they help maintain the binding. When removed, she trails off. Someone's been removing them deliberately, I realize, setting them around the cemetery for people like me to find. Yes, drawing new potential victims into the cycle, creating chaos. The presence in my mind shifts suddenly, as if Anna is being pulled away. "They're coming," she warns, her voice fading. "Remember, trust the Buckleys. Find Ellie. She knows more than she should for her age. Anna's voice cuts off abruptly, replaced by the same hollow, many-toned whisper I heard earlier. "Did you enjoy your chat, Digger? Little Anna is so resilient. A pity her usefulness is ending." I try to shut out the voice, focusing on the blood-stained compass still sitting on the altar. The needle spins lazily now, as if the connection to Section 3 is weakening. The binding fades, the voice confirms. Dawn comes, yes, but Vern will not. The sheriff has seen to that. Alarm courses through me. "What have you done to Vern?" A laugh ripples through my consciousness. "We? Nothing. Humans harm each other far more efficiently than we ever could. Such inventive cruelty." Before I can respond, a sharp pain lances through my marked arm. I roll up my sleeve to find the dark lines have formed a distinct pattern, a crude version of the 7-rayed circle. The skin around it has taken on a grayish tone, cold to the touch. Beautiful, isn't it? The voice purrs, the mark of belonging. I stumble to the chapel door, suddenly desperate for fresh air, for escape from this voice in my head. The iron bolt slides open under my touch despite my earlier struggle to close it. Rule 3 flares in my mind, a warning. But it's daylight I crave, not the false promise of rescue. Just a glimpse of the sky to remind myself that a world exists beyond this nightmare. I open the door a crack. The cemetery lies quiet under pre-dawn gloom. The eastern sky shows the first hint of gray light. Maybe an hour until true sunrise. Movement near the main gates catches my eye. Headlights. A vehicle pulling up outside the cemetery. Hope surges. Perhaps Vern has arrived early, until I see the distinctive light bar of a sheriff's department SUV. The vehicle parks, and Sheriff Nordstrom steps out, looking fresh and composed in a clean uniform. She's alone and moves with purpose toward the cemetery gates, a large keyring in hand. I close the chapel door silently, retreating into the shadows. If what Anna told me is true, Nordstrom is actively working to free the sleepers. Her arrival before dawn can't be good. Through the window, I watch as she unlocks the gates. West first, then south, then east, then north, the reverse of Rule 4. Even from a distance, I can see her satisfied smile as she completes the improper sequence. The ground trembles slightly, a ripple passing through the earth like a stone dropped in water. The sheriff walks confidently towards Section 3, stopping at the unmarked grave with its 7-rayed symbol. From my hiding place, I can't see exactly what she's doing, but when she straightens, she's holding what appears to be a jar filled with dark liquid. She pours it over the unmarked grave, the liquid soaking into the ground unnaturally fast. Rule 5. Leave offerings of fresh water by the unmarked grave in Section 3 on Fridays. Whatever Nordstrom is pouring, it's definitely not water. The soil around the grave begins to steam in the cold morning air. She's breaking the binding. Anna's voice returns suddenly, weaker than before. The water dilutes their essence, keeps them diffuse. Blood strengthens them. Blood, I repeat, horrified. Buckley blood, Sanders blood. They saved it from her autopsy. The implications hit me like a physical blow. The entire death, the funeral, the burial, all orchestrated to bring a sacrifice close to Section 3, to harvest blood for this ritual. As the sheriff finishes pouring the contents of the jar, the ground around the unmarked grave begins to sink, creating a shallow depression. She steps back, watching with evident satisfaction. I need to stop her, but how? My marked arm hangs uselessly at my side now, too heavy to lift properly. The binding ritual has progressed further than I realized. A new vehicle appears at the gates. An old blue pickup truck I don't recognize. It parks haphazardly, and a slight figure jumps out, running into the cemetery. Ellie Buckley. She carries something bulky wrapped in cloth. The sheriff hasn't noticed her yet, too focused on the sinking ground in Section 3. I should warn Ellie somehow, but opening the door might give away my position. Let her come, the voice in my head suggests. Let her join us. 2 new vessels instead of 1. Shut up, I mutter, pressing my forehead against the cool glass of the window. I watch as Ellie makes her way stealthily through the graves, approaching Section 3 from the opposite direction from Nordstrom. Whatever Ellie's carrying, she's handling it carefully. The sheriff finally notices her, turning with a speed that seems too quick, too fluid for a normal human. Eleanor Buckley, she calls, her voice carrying clearly through the pre-dawn stillness. You're trespassing on closed property. Ellie stands her ground. I'm a Buckley. This cemetery belongs as much to my family as to yours. Your family's claim weakened with Sandra's death. The balance has shifted. That's where you're wrong, Ellie replies, unwrapping the cloth-covered object. The line doesn't end with Aunt Sandra. She holds up what appears to be an old leather-bound book, similar to the Keeper's volume I found in the chapel. My grandmother Clara left this for me. She knew what you were planning. She prepared me. Nordstrom takes a step forward, her hand moving to her service weapon. You're 16, Eleanor. You cannot be the Buckley Keeper. I was recognized last month at the spring equinox. Grandma Clara performed the ritual before she died. This new information connects with what Anna told me. The Buckleys opposed the Nordstroms, tried to maintain the binding. Clara must have initiated Ellie as a keeper to ensure the Buckley family would still have representation if something happened to Sandra. Nordstrom laughs, the sound unnaturally high. Even if that's true, you're alone. The circle requires 7. The Petersons are gone. The Hansons end with Sandra. The Wilsons. She gestures at the sinking ground. Well, Anna will be fully incorporated soon. Vern is indisposed and Dale Schmidt stands with me. You murdered Aunt Sandra, Ellie accuses, her voice steady despite her youth. You've been planning this for years. Not murder, sacrifice, necessary for the transition. You're insane if you think you can control them. The sheriff smiles coldly. The Nordstroms have prepared for generations. We have methods your family wouldn't understand. While they're talking, I notice more movement at the gates. A procession of vehicles has arrived silently. 3 cars and a van. People emerge, moving with coordinated purpose towards Section 3. I recognize Dale Schmidt from the funeral. The others are strangers to me, but they move with the unnatural fluidity I've come to associate with the sleeper's mimics. Your reinforcements have arrived, Ellie says, nodding toward the approaching group. But they're not what you think. Nordstrom turns, her posture shifting from confidence to uncertainty. Dale? Schmidt approaches, his face pleasant, but blank. Good morning, Lynn. Beautiful day for a resurrection, isn't it? The others? The Peterson proxy arrived last night from Minneapolis. We were lucky to find a Wilson cousin in Bismarck. And this, he gestures to a tall, gaunt man, is technically a Hanson by marriage, good enough for our purposes. Something is wrong, The sheriff's composure slips visibly. "Where's Rogers?" "I sent him to collect Vern." Schmidt's smile doesn't reach his eyes. Change of plans. The old man was resistant. I suddenly understand what Ellie meant. These aren't Nordstrom's allies. They're mimics, duplicates created by the sleepers. The real sheriff must have been expecting actual human representatives from the families. Instead, she's surrounded by the very entities she thought she could control. The voice in my head laughs softly. "Watch carefully, Digger. See how humans destroy themselves with ambition." Nordstrom seems to realize her mistake at the same moment. Her hand closes around her weapon, but she's already surrounded. "The circle will be complete," Schmidt says, his voice now overlaid with that familiar hollow echo. "But not as you imagined, Lynn Nordstrom." The sky has lightened further, the first rays of sun touching the tallest monuments. Dawn is minutes away. My binding should break soon, but what happens then? Will the sleepers be fully awakened by Nordstrom's ritual? Ellie catches sight of me in the chapel window. Her eyes widen slightly, but she gives no other indication she's seen me. Instead, she begins to back away slowly from the confrontation unfolding in Section 3. "Run, girl," the voice in my head hisses. "Run while you can." To my surprise, I find myself silently echoing the sentiment. "Run, Ellie. Get as far from here as possible." But Ellie doesn't run. Instead, she circles around toward the chapel, the keeper's book clutched tightly against her chest. Her eyes never leave the tableau in Section 3, where Nordstrom now stands rigidly surrounded by the mimics. She's coming for me. But is it to help, or to make sure I join her in whatever desperate last stand she's planning? I crack open the chapel door, just as Ellie reaches it. She slips inside, and I quickly bolt it behind her. Her eyes widen at the sight of my marked arm. "How long?" she asks, nodding toward the dark lines. "Since about 2 in the morning. Blood-binding ritual." She winces. Amateur binding. That was desperate. I didn't have a lot of options. I gesture toward the window where we can see Nordstrom still surrounded by the mimics. What's happening out there? They're completing the circle, but not how Nordstrom planned. Ellie opens her book, flipping through pages covered with handwritten notes and diagrams. The sleepers need 7 human vessels with connections to the founding families. They're collecting them. Vessels, human bodies, anchors to this reality. She points at my arm. "You're already being prepared as one." The sun breaks fully over the horizon, rays of light streaming through the chapel windows. The moment dawn officially arrives, my body shudders violently. The compass on the altar spins wildly, then cracks down the middle, the binding broken. The voice in my head fades, but the mark remains, the dark lines now reaching my shoulder. The ache subsides to a dull throb. "We don't have much time," Ellie says, watching me with clinical detachment. "Once they finish with Nordstrom, they'll come for us. What can we do?" There are 2 options. She looks far older than her 16 years as she lays them out. 1. We attempt to rebuild the circle with whoever we can find from the original families. That's a long shot with Nordstrom compromised and Vern missing. And 2? We collapse the tunnels, bury them deeper than they've ever been. It won't destroy them, but it might buy another generation or 2. Through the window, we see the mimics have formed an actual circle around Nordstrom. The sheriff stands rigidly, her face a mask of terror, as Dale Schmidt presses his palms against her temples. The ground beneath them has continued to sink, creating a depression now several feet deep. "How would we collapse the tunnels?" I ask. Ellie's expression turns grim. "Explosives. My father works for Dakota Access. I took some from his truck." I stare at her in disbelief. You're going to blow up the cemetery? Just section 3. The main chamber is directly beneath the unmarked grave. If we can cause a sinkhole there, it might collapse their dwelling space. It's an insane plan, but I don't have a better one. What do you need me to do? First, we need to slow your transformation. It's progressing too quickly. She pulls a small vial of cloudy liquid from her pocket. Drink this. What is it? Family recipe. Mostly graveyard dirt, holy water, and some herbs. It tastes like wet dog, but it'll help. I take the vial hesitantly. You're sure? Number. But we're short on options. Fair enough. I down the contents, gagging at the earthy, bitter taste. Almost immediately, a cooling sensation spreads through my marked arm, the throbbing diminishing. It won't reverse the process, Ellie explains, but it should slow it down enough to keep you functional for a few more hours. Outside, something has changed. The mimics have backed away from Nordstrom, who remains standing in the center of their circle. But her posture is different. Straighter, unnaturally rigid, her head tilted at an odd angle. They've taken her, Ellie murmurs. That's one vessel claimed. As if hearing her words, all 7 figures, the 6 mimics in Nordstrom, turn in unison to face the chapel. Time to go, Ellie says, grabbing my good arm. There's a back door behind the altar. I hadn't noticed it before. A small wooden door that blends nearly seamlessly with the paneling. Ellie produces an ancient iron key from her pocket. How did you know about that? Buckley family knowledge. My grandmother made sure I knew every entrance and exit in this place. The door opens onto a narrow path that winds between older graves, partially obscured by overgrown yew hedges. We stay low, Ellie leading the way with confident familiarity. Where are we going? I whisper. Caretaker's cottage. If Vern's alive, we need him. If not, his keeper artifacts might help us. We skirt the edge of Section 2, keeping to the shadows of monuments and trees. From this angle, we can see Section 3 where Nordstrom and the mimics remain in their circle. The depression has deepened further, now resembling a shallow pit. They're excavating, Ellie explains in a hushed voice, exposing the chamber entrance. Why don't they just dig themselves out? They've been tunneling under the chapel. Different purpose. Those tunnels are for hunting, for extending their influence. The main chamber can only be opened from above, through ritual. We reach the small cottage where Vern lives at the edge of the cemetery. The door stands ajar, which immediately puts me on alert. Ellie motions for me to wait while she peers inside. Clear, she whispers after a moment. But someone's been here. The cottage interior is modest. A single room serving as living space and kitchen, with a curtained-off area presumably containing a bed. The place has been thoroughly searched, drawers upended and furniture moved from the walls. They were looking for his keeper artifacts, Ellie says, moving directly to the stone fireplace. But Vern would never keep them in obvious places. She presses specific stones in sequence, and a small section of the hearth slides back, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lies a wooden box carved with the familiar 7-rayed symbol. Ellie opens it carefully. Good. They're still here. The box contains several items. A silver medallion matching the one I saw in the old photograph. A small leather pouch. A vial of what appears to be blood. And a folded piece of parchment sealed with wax. These are the Ellsworth family's binding tools, she explains, pocketing the medallion and pouch. Each family has their own. Together they can reinforce the circle. Where would Vern go if he were in trouble? The old Ellsworth family plot is on their original homestead, about 3 miles east of town. It's his safe ground. She hands me the vial and sealed parchment. Keep these in your pocket, not the marked arm. As I tuck them away, a phone on the table buzzes with an incoming text. Ellie grabs it, reading quickly. "It's for you," she says, handing it over. The message comes from an unknown number. "Michael, get out now. They know what you are. You're the key. AW. Anna Wilson, somehow reaching out from within the Sleepers Collective." "What does she mean, what you are?" I ask. Ellie hesitates, then speaks carefully. "You're not here by accident, Michael. There's a reason you keep having the dreams. A reason the rules came so easily to you." I'm listening. The original pact in 1887 included a safeguard. If the circle ever faced complete failure, a descendant with the right sensitivity would be drawn here, a failsafe. The pieces click into place with sickening clarity. Are you saying I'm related to one of the 7 families? The Wilsons. Your maternal grandmother's maiden name was Wilson, wasn't it? I stare at her in shock. How could you possibly know that? We've been tracking descendants for generations. When the position at Oakwood opened up, certain signs were monitored. Dreams about digging, sensitivity to spiritual disturbances, geological training. You matched the profile. My mind reels. I'd applied for the job out of desperation, or so I thought. But the dreams had started before I came to Williston, back in Minneapolis. I'd attributed them to stress, to the breakup with Jamie, to my uncertain future. So I was manipulated into coming here? By who? Vern? Not just Vern. The remaining true keepers, my grandmother, Vern, and a Peterson cousin in Fargo. They knew the circle was weakening, that Nordstrom was planning something. They needed a Wilson. Why not just tell me? Would you have believed any of this without experiencing it firsthand? Ellie asks reasonably. Besides, the connection had to develop naturally. That's how the failsafe works. Before I can respond, the cottage windows rattle as a low rumble passes through the ground. They're making progress, Ellie says grimly. We need to move. The explosives are already in position, but we need to trigger them from the caretaker's office. There's a master switch there connected to the original tunneling system from the railroad days. We exit the cottage cautiously. The scene in Section 3 has changed dramatically. The depression has become a true sinkhole, at least 15 feet across. Nordstrom and the Mimic stand around its edge, arms raised. From our position, we can see down into the hole. A stone chamber lies exposed, its walls carved with symbols that hurt my eyes to look at directly. They've uncovered the top of the main chamber, Ellie whispers. If they fully open it. We make our way toward the caretaker's office, using tombstones and trees for cover. My marked arm feels heavier with each step, the cooling effect of Ellie's concoction already fading. Halfway there, Ellie freezes, pulling me down behind a large monument. Look, she whispers, pointing toward the main gates. A procession of vehicles is entering the cemetery, ordinary cars and trucks driven by normal-looking people. But their movements are unnaturally synchronized as they park in a perfect line. Proxies, Ellie explains. People under their influence. The sleepers are drawing in witnesses for the awakening. Why? What purpose does an audience serve? They feed on awareness, on being perceived. Each human witness strengthens their manifestation in our reality. The new arrivals, at least 20 people, move towards Section 3 in eerie unison. I recognize some of them from town, the cashier from Cash-Wise Foods, the bartender from the Lobo Lounge, ordinary Williston residents now moving like sleepwalkers. We're running out of time, I say. We make it to the caretaker's office without being spotted. Inside, Ellie heads directly to a large metal cabinet that I'd always assumed contained landscape tools. She unlocks it with another key from her seemingly endless supply, revealing a complex switchboard that looks decades old. This controlled the original electric detonation system for clearing boulders during cemetery construction. She explains, running her fingers over the switches. My grandfather modified it to connect to a secondary system beneath Section 3. How do we know this will work? Those explosives must be ancient. They're not the originals. My father replaced them last month as a maintenance project. The town council approved it, without realizing what they were authorizing. Ellie begins flipping switches in sequence, bringing the system to life. Indicator lights blink on, most glowing green, but 2 flashing red. Problem? I ask. 2 of the charges aren't responding, probably damaged by tunnel movement. She chews her lip thoughtfully. It might still be enough, but the collapse won't be as complete as we hoped. Through the office window, we can see the crowd of proxies has formed concentric circles around the sinkhole. From within the exposed chamber, a glow begins to emanate, pulsing with a sickly greenish light. We're out of options, I say. Trigger it now. Ellie's hand hovers over the master switch. There's one more thing you should know. This will likely kill everyone in Section 3, including the proxies. I look out at the innocent townspeople, now swaying in unison as the light from below intensifies. They're already lost, aren't they? Probably. But some might have been recoverable, given time. An impossible choice. But as the light grows brighter and a high-pitched tone begins to fill the air, I know we've run out of time for ethical debates. Do it, I say. Ellie flips the switch. Nothing happens. She tries again, toggling it back and forth with increasing urgency. Something's wrong. The circuit isn't completing. As if in response to her words, the voice returns to my mind. But different now. Stronger. More cohesive. Did you really think we wouldn't find your little explosives, Michael Wilson? The voice is almost conversational. They've been neutralized. But we appreciate knowing your plans. It helps us anticipate your next move. Ellie looks at me, recognizing from my expression that something is wrong. They're in your head again? I nod, then notice movement outside the window. A figure is approaching the office. Sheriff Nordstrom, moving with the unnaturally fluid gait that confirms she's now a vessel. Company coming, I warn, pointing. Ellie curses under her breath, pulling a revolver from her jacket pocket. At my shocked expression, she says simply, Buckley family heirloom. Iron bullets. But we both know a single gun won't save us now. Back door, Ellie whispers, pulling me toward a narrow hallway behind Vern's desk that I'd never noticed before. The old house is a maze of architectural afterthoughts, additions and modifications accumulated over a century. We slip through just as the front door opens. Nordstrom's footsteps are unnaturally quiet, but I can sense her presence like a cold weight pressing against my consciousness. The hallway leads to a screened-in porch that must have once overlooked gardens, now long overgrown. Ellie carefully eases open the squeaky screen door, and we dash across open ground toward a maintenance shed about 30 yards away. We need to get to Section 1, Ellie says once we're safely inside the shed. The small space is crammed with landscaping equipment and smells of gasoline and motor oil. The original 7 families' crypts are there. They built in a fail-safe. Different from me, I hope. I mutter, rubbing my marked arm, which has begun to tingle unpleasantly. The family crypts were constructed with special properties. They contain, I guess you'd call them reset mechanisms. For what? For when things go this wrong. Each family built their tomb with a contingency plan. The Buckley's crypt contains a device that can call the remaining true keepers. The Ellsworths has something that can temporarily blind the sleepers to our presence. The roar of an engine interrupts her explanation. Through a grimy window, we see a pickup truck careen through the cemetery gates and skid to a halt near the caretaker's office. A frail figure emerges, leaning heavily on a walking stick. "Vern," I breathe, relief washing through me. "He's alive." But our relief is short-lived. Sheriff Nordstrom emerges from the office, her movements smooth and predatory as she approaches the old man. "We need to help him," I say, reaching for the shed door. Ellie holds me back. "We can't. Not directly. But this might be the distraction we need to reach Section 1. She's right, but it feels wrong to use Vern as bait. He stands his ground as Nordstrom circles him, his posture defiant despite his obvious physical weakness. "The perimeter is this way," Ellie says, pointing to where the shed backs against the cemetery's outer wall. "There's a maintenance gate." We slip out the shed's back door and follow the cemetery wall. The sounds from Section 3 have intensified, that high-pitched tone now punctuated by rhythmic chanting. The gathered proxies have begun some kind of ceremony, their voices a discordant chorus. My head throbs in time with their chanting, and the mark on my arm pulses with sickly light. I'm running out of time. The maintenance gate is small and rusted, barely visible behind overgrown bushes. Ellie unlocks it with yet another key from her seemingly endless collection, and we step outside the cemetery grounds. "How do we get to Section 1 from here?" I ask, disoriented by the unfamiliar perspective. We follow the wall around. It's the long way, but will be less visible. As we skirt the perimeter, I notice the sky has changed. Though it's full morning now, dark clouds have gathered directly over the cemetery, swirling in an unnatural pattern. Lightning flickers within the clouds, but there's no thunder, just that persistent high-pitched tone growing louder. "Weather manipulation," Ellie explains, seeing my expression. "It's beginning. What is? The full awakening. They're creating ideal conditions." We reach an area where the cemetery wall has partially collapsed, creating a convenient entry point near Section 1. The oldest graves and family crypts lie before us, their weathered stone monuments cast an eerie light from the strange storm above. There, Ellie points to an ornate mausoleum bearing the name Buckley. We need to get inside. Unlike the simple headstones surrounding it, the Buckley crypt is an elaborate structure with classical columns and a stone angel guarding its iron door. As we approach, I notice the angel's face has been deliberately defaced, its features chiseled away. "Nordstrom's work," Ellie says bitterly. "Her family has been trying to sabotage the others for generations." The mausoleum door is secured with a padlock that Ellie quickly opens. Inside, the air is surprisingly fresh, not musty as I'd expected. Stone shelves line the walls, holding caskets of various ages. At the center stands a stone altar, topped with a bronze container shaped like a 7-pointed star. "The calling device," Ellie explains, opening the container. Inside lies a simple silver bell. Each family's crypt contains objects that, when used together, can either strengthen or collapse the circle. The Buckleys were tasked with communication. Who will hear it? Anyone with keeper blood who's been initiated. There aren't many left, but there might be enough. She rings the bell, a clear, piercing tone that seems to resonate far beyond what its small size should produce. The sound vibrates through my chest and into my marked arm, causing the dark lines to writhe like living things. "How long should we wait?" I ask, fighting a wave of nausea. "We don't. Next, we need to get to the Ellsworth crypt." She points through the mausoleum door to another structure about 30 yards away. "That's where we'll find the concealment device." As we prepare to make our dash to the next crypt, movement among the gravestones stops us. I expect to see Nordstrom or one of the mimics, but instead, a thin, elderly man emerges from behind the monument. "Vern!" I call out before I can stop myself. The old caretaker's head snaps toward us, his roomy eyes widening with recognition. He hobbles in our direction with surprising speed, his walking stick striking the ground with each hurried step. "Foolish children," he wheezes when he reaches us. "You've made everything worse." Ellie squares her shoulders. "We're trying to fix what your generation failed to maintain." Vern snorts derisively. "Arrogance. You triggered emergency protocols without proper preparation. The bell shouldn't have been rung until the other items were in position." "There wasn't time," I interject. "They've already opened the chamber. They have vessels." "I know," Vern says grimly. "I saw Lynn and the others." He turns to me, his gaze lingering on my marked arm. The Wilson connection manifested, I see. Faster than expected. "You could have warned me before hiring me," I say, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "Would you have believed me? Would you have stayed?" He shakes his head. "We needed you in place, receptive to the influences. The dreams prepared your mind." A particularly bright flash of lightning illuminates the cemetery, followed by an actual thunderclap this time. The storm is intensifying, the clouds now rotating like a slow-motion tornado directly above Section 3. "We need to get to your family's crypt," Ellie tells Vern. "The concealment device won't work anymore," he interrupts. "Not with the chamber open. We need something stronger now." "Like what?" I demand. Vern eyes me speculatively. "Your binding is progressing. That creates possibilities." "I'm not offering myself as a sacrifice," I say flatly. "Not sacrifice. Redirection." Vern pulls a small leather book from his pocket. "There's a way to use your connection to one of the sleepers, likely the one that absorbed Anna Wilson, to confuse their collective consciousness. I'm still connected to Anna, I realize. She warned me through a text message, said I was the key." Vern nods, a spark of hope lighting his tired eyes. "That's it. If Anna's consciousness still exists separately within the collective, we might be able to amplify her, use her as a wedge." "To do what?" Ellie asks skeptically. "To split their attention, create a window for us to reach the central mechanism in the Peterson crypt." "What's in the Peterson crypt?" I ask. "A shutdown switch. Crude but effective. It will collapse all the tunnels simultaneously." "I thought that's what the explosives were for," I say, confused. "Amateur approach," Vern dismisses with a wave. "The Peterson device uses the sleeper's own energy against them. It redirects the power they're currently channeling to awaken themselves." Another crash of thunder, loud enough to make the ground vibrate. The chanting from Section 3 has changed, becoming faster and more urgent. "They're in the acceleration phase," Vern says grimly. "We have minutes, not hours." We make our way through Section L toward the Peterson family crypt, a stark, modernist structure that stands in contrast to the Victorian elegance of the older mausoleums. As we approach, I notice strange symbols etched into its concrete walls. Not the seven-rayed circle, but complex mathematical formulas and diagrams. "Alfred Peterson was a physicist," Vern explains, seeing my interest. "He understood the sleepers differently from the others, as energy patterns rather than entities. His approach was more scientific. The crypt door is sealed with what appears to be a sophisticated electronic lock, remarkably out of place among the ancient stones. "I can't open this," Ellie admits, staring at the keypad. "The Petersons never shared their codes with the other families." Vern steps forward. They shared with the Ellsworths. We've always been the neutral party. He taps a complex sequence into the keypad. Nothing happens. They must have changed it, he mutters, trying another combination. The lock remains stubbornly engaged. Meanwhile, the mark on my arm has spread across my chest now, the dark lines forming complex patterns that pulse with each heartbeat. The pain has subsided into a strange numbness, as if that part of my body no longer fully belongs to me. We need another way, Ellie insists, her young face tense with urgency. I step toward the door, drawn by an instinct I don't understand. The moment my marked hand touches the metal surface, the symbols on my skin light up in response to the mathematical engravings on the wall. It recognizes your Wilson connection, Vern breathes. The Wilsons and Petersons were research partners. The lock clicks open, and the heavy door swings inward. Unlike the Buckley crypt, the Peterson mausoleum contains no caskets, no obvious burial spots. Instead, the interior resembles a laboratory, with walls lined with equipment that somehow looks both antiquated and futuristic. At the center stands what appears to be a control panel surrounding a glass cylinder that reaches from floor to ceiling. Inside the cylinder, suspended in some clear fluid, floats a small, irregular object that resembles a piece of basalt. "What is that?" I ask, approaching the cylinder. "A fragment of the original chamber wall," Vern explains, "the only piece ever successfully removed. Alfred Peterson discovered it retained a sympathetic connection to the larger structure. Whatever happens to this fragment affects the whole." Ellie examines the control panel. "How do we activate it?" "We need to channel energy through the Wilson connection," Vern says, looking at my marked arm. "The binding ritual you performed created a conduit. Incomplete, uncontrolled, but potentially useful. What do I do?" "Place your marked hand on the cylinder. Your connection to Anna Wilson should allow you to direct energy through the fragment." "Should?" I repeat skeptically. "There are no guarantees with technology this old, integrating with forces this complex." From outside the crypt comes the sound of approaching footsteps, many sets moving in unnatural synchronization. "They've found us," Ellie whispers, drawing her revolver. "Make your choice quickly, Michael," Vern urges. "If the vessels reach us, it's over." I look at the cylinder, at the unremarkable rock floating inside that somehow holds the key to collapsing the sleeper's dwelling. I think of Anna Wilson, trapped for 60 years in a nightmare existence, fighting to maintain her humanity. Of Sandra Buckley, sacrificed by her neighbors and friends to feed ancient, hungry things. The footsteps grow louder, accompanied by that high-pitched tone that now feels like it's coming from inside my own head. "Do it," Ellie urges. "Now!" I press my marked palm against the cool glass. Immediately, the dark lines on my skin illuminate, energy flowing visibly from my body into the cylinder. The rock inside begins to glow with the same sickly light that pulses beneath my skin. Pain explodes through my arm and chest, as if something is being torn from me cell by cell. I try to pull away, but can't. My hand is fused to the glass surface. Through the haze of agony, I hear Vern chanting something in a language I don't recognize. Ellie stands guard at the door, her gun aimed at the entrance. The first figure appears, Dale Schmidt, his face now barely human, features shifting and flowing. Behind him comes Nordstrom, and then others, the proxies from town, their eyes glowing with that same greenish light. "Remember Rule 3, Vern whispers urgently in my ear. "If you hear your name called, ignore it unless you can see who's calling." As if summoned by his words, voices begin to call to me. Jamie, my parents, professors from college, friends from my past, each voice perfect, each one begging me to stop, to release the cylinder. I close my eyes, focusing on the connection I feel to Anna Wilson. In my mind, I visualize reaching for her, pulling her consciousness forward through the binding that links us. "Anna," I whisper, "help me." A new voice speaks, not from outside, but from within the connection itself. "Channel through me, Michael. I'll be your conduit." The pain intensifies until I'm certain I can't bear another second. Then, abruptly, it transforms into a rush of power so intense that light streams from my eyes and mouth. The rock in the cylinder spins faster and faster, its glow changing from green to blinding white. "It's working!" Vern shouts over a roar that seems to come from everywhere at once. The ground beneath the crypt begins to shake violently. The proxies at the door stumble backward, their coordinated movements failing as the connection to their controllers weakens. "The tunnels are collapsing!" Ellie cries, bracing herself against a wall. The cylinder shatters suddenly, the rock inside disintegrating into fine dust that swirls in a miniature vortex before vanishing completely. The release of pressure throws me backward into Vern's arms. "We need to get out," the old man says, supporting my weight as my legs threaten to buckle. "The entire cemetery may become unstable." We push past the confused proxies, who stand blinking like people waking from a deep sleep. Outside, the unnatural storm is breaking up, the swirling clouds dispersing to reveal normal morning sunshine. In the distance, Section 3 has become a massive sinkhole, at least 50 feet across and still growing. The unmarked grave and its surrounding monuments have disappeared entirely, swallowed by the collapsing earth. We stumble toward the gates as monuments topple and smaller sinkholes open throughout the grounds. The proxies scatter in all directions, their shared purpose dissolved. What about the people? I gasp, watching as some flee, while others stand dazed among the falling stones. "They'll recover," Vern assures me. "The influence was temporary for most." "And the sleepers?" Ellie asks, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Buried deeper than before," Vern says grimly. "Not destroyed, they can't be, but contained again, weakened. It will take them decades to rebuild their network of tunnels, to regain enough strength to attempt another awakening." We reach the gates just as a particularly violent tremor rocks the ground. Looking back, I see the caretaker's office collapse in on itself. Decades of records and history lost in an instant. Once safely outside, we watch as the destruction gradually slows, the ground stabilizing. The sinkhole in Section 3 has stopped expanding, its edges beginning to settle. "What now?" I ask, examining my arm. The mark remains, but the dark lines have faded to what look like normal tattoos, intricate patterns that no longer pulse with light. "Now," Vern says, his voice heavy with exhaustion, "we rebuild. The circle, the containment, everything." "With who?" Ellie demands. "Half the original families are gone or compromised." Vern looks at her, then at me, his expression somber but determined. "With whoever is left, and whoever is new. The duty remains, regardless of who carries it." I think of the life I'd planned before coming to Williston, the geology career, the normal existence I'd imagined. That possibility seems to have vanished into the sinkhole, along with the unmarked grave. "I don't have a choice, do I?" I ask, already knowing the answer. "There's always a choice," Vern says quietly. "But there are also consequences to choices. The Wilson line is now active in you. The dreams won't stop. The connection exists." In the distance, sirens wail as emergency vehicles respond to what will likely be reported as a major sinkhole incident, perhaps blamed on old mining tunnels or spring flooding. The mark on my arm tingles slightly. and somewhere deep in my mind, I feel Anna Wilson's presence. Faint but distinct, finally free from the collective, but somehow still connected to me. "I'll stay," I say finally. "At least until we understand what's happened. What I've become." Ellie nods approvingly, while Vern simply looks relieved. They both understand what I'm only beginning to grasp, that Oakwood Cemetery holds secrets that must be kept, and that I'm now one of them. 3 months later, I stand at the edge of what was once Section 3, watching as workers pour concrete into what the town now calls the Oakwood Sinkhole. The official explanation, abandoned mining tunnels from the early 1900s, has been accepted without much questioning. People in Williston have a talent for not looking too closely at the strange occurrences that plague their town. The cemetery has been partially reopened, though Sections 3 and 5 remain closed indefinitely. I've taken over as official caretaker now that Vern has retired to focus on his health. In reality, he spends most days teaching me and Ellie the deeper knowledge of keepers, preparing us for the responsibilities we've inherited. My new cottage, rebuilt where Vern's once stood, is sparse but comfortable. The dreams haven't stopped, but they've changed. I no longer wake in terror, drenched in sweat. Instead, the dreams have a purpose now, showing me weak points in the new containment, places that need attention. The mark on my arm remains, a permanent reminder of my connection to what lies below. Sometimes late at night, I feel Anna Wilson's presence, a gentle consciousness that brushes against mine like a cat seeking warmth. She rarely speaks now, but when she does, her warnings are always accurate. Vern believes she's become a kind of watchdog, monitoring the sleepers from within. Sheriff Nordstrom survived physically, but remains in a psychiatric facility in Bismarck, diagnosed with catatonic schizophrenia. The other vessels, including Dale Schmidt, have similar conditions. Doctors are baffled by the cluster of cases, but we know the truth. Their minds were hollowed out to make room for entities that have now been dragged back below. Most of the proxies recovered fully, with no memory of their time under influence. A few report strange dreams or inexplicable phobias, fear of confined spaces, of being buried alive. We monitor them discreetly. I've established new rules for Oakwood Cemetery, posted clearly at the entrance and enforced without exception. Rule 1. Cemetery closes at sunset. No exceptions. Rule 2. No excavation without prior written approval. Rule 3. Do not remove or disturb any stones, markers, or artifacts. Rule 4. Report any unusual sounds, sights, or ground movement to the caretaker immediately. Rule 5. Stay on designated paths. Rule 6. No overnight parking or camping on cemetery grounds. Rule 7. Respect the dead and their resting places. Simple, reasonable cemetery regulations to the average visitor. Secret safeguards to those who know what they're really protecting against. Ellie visits daily after school, absorbing Buckley family knowledge from journals and artifacts her grandmother left behind. At 16, she balances AP physics homework with ancient binding rituals with remarkable adaptability. Sometimes I envy her. She's had her entire life to prepare for this role. I'm still catching up. The Wilson family grimoire, recovered from a safe deposit box in Bismarck using keys found in Vern's cottage, sits on my desk, half its pages still unread. The book contains generations of observations about the sleepers, theories about their origins, and methods for managing the connection I now share with them. Some nights I can't bear to read further. Other nights I can't stop turning pages. Today, I'm placing a new unmarked stone in what will become the reimagined Section 3, a simple granite tablet bearing the 7 rayed circle. Beneath it, I bury a box containing 7 stone figurines, each carved by hand in my cottage during the long winter evenings. Anchors, Ellie calls them. Tethers to keep the circle strong. As I smooth the earth over the small box, I feel a familiar pressure against my consciousness. Anna, acknowledging the ritual with what feels like approval. We'll do better this time, I promise her, and the watching presence that was once Oakwood's lost daughter. The ground beneath my hands feels solid, stable, but I know better than anyone what lies beneath, and what it will take to keep it there. The dreams tell me. The mark on my arm tells me. The whispers from the graves tell me. I am Michael Reeves, the Wilson Keeper, and the cemetery of secrets is my responsibility now.